good evening, and welcome to another quiet step back in time. If you found your way here tonight, perhaps it's because the world seems a little too loud these days. Perhaps your thoughts are restless, or perhaps you're simply looking for something quiet. A slow voice, a gentle rhythm, a story from long ago where nothing needs to be done and nowhere needs to be gone. Today's story takes us far from the present moment. We'll wander slowly through the shadowed marble corridors of early medieval Rome, a city that remembers its glory but lives now in the long twilight of the empire. Its streets are cracked by time. Its basilicas echo not with triumph, but with uncertainty. The emperors are long gone. In their place, bishops and kings, power and prayer intertwined together. This is not a story about war, although war always lurks in the corners. This is not a story of miracles, though holy men talk as if they expect them. It is, instead, a strange and solemn memory, one that history has almost forgotten, but never has. For in the year 897, beneath the gilded ceilings of St. John Lateran, one pope put another pope on trial, only the other pope was already dead. This may sound like the beginning of a satire or a cruel joke, but it was neither. It was real, and solemn, and quiet, and strange. So make yourself comfortable. Wrap yourself in a blanket, let the noise of the day die down, and know that this strange little chapter of history, this quiet and somber moment in the history of Rome, is here and now to gently bring you to peace. And before we begin, just a gentle reminder. If you find peace in these quiet corners of the past, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Feel free to like if you want. And in the comments below, I'd love to know. Where in the world are you listening tonight? From what city? From what country? It's always nice to know that these old stories are finding ears in faraway lands. So, thank you. And now, let's get started. A stillness before the storm. In the heart of Rome, the air once again moved gently through the narrow streets of the old city. It was early in the year 897, and the Tiber flowed with a lazy, brown persistence. The riverbanks were still wet from recent rains, and a few traders stood quietly by their carts, unhurried in the morning mist. Time passed more slowly here, as it often did in Rome. The stones beneath the sandals of monks and messengers had seen centuries rise and fade. Beyond the weathered stones and worn market stalls, the Basilica of St. John Lateran stood with solemn poise. Its shadow stretched across the cracked flagstones of the surrounding court. Though not the Vatican, this basilica had long been the seat of papal power, older in a way than even the papacy's strongest walls. Inside, the incense still hung in the cold morning air. The windows were pale with condensation, and the figures of saints, chiseled in marble, looked on with a quiet and enduring gaze. There was nothing hurried, nothing loud. We are far from battles, from swords and trumpet calls. This is a tale of politics, of bones, and of ceremony. A story drawn not with fire, but with silence and robe-lined corridors. It is a story of a trial, not of a living man, but of one long dead. A pope brought back into the world not to be honored, but judged. And as we begin, we are not yet in the Lateran itself, nor at the court where judgment will be passed. We begin in quieter corners, in parchment rooms, in candlelit monasteries, and in the troubled heart of a fragile papacy. The early weeks of 897 were cold and damp. Winter still clung to the hills around the city. The roads from Ostia and Capua were muddy and pitted with the wheels of wagons, burdened with wood and salt. Pilgrims came slowly, sometimes limping, often in silence. The feast of the Epiphany had passed, and Lent loomed ahead. Beneath the tiled roof of the monastery of St. Anastasius, Brother Erminaldus, now aged and nearly blind, sat hunched over his morning reading. His fingers traced the letters more than his eyes read them. The fire in the stone hearth had grown dim, and no one spoke. Each breath seemed to fog the air. The monks knew what the city whispered, even if they did not speak it aloud, that Pope Stephen VI had ordered a trial, not for a man of the street, nor a nobleman or soldier, but for a corpse, for Pope Formosus, dead for more than 8 months, buried beneath stone and incense. Brother Erminaldus said nothing, but he paused in his reading. The wind rattled faintly against the shutters. He remembered Formosus, his long face, his thin hands, his voice which cracked when he tried to sing. He had spoken kindly to the monks long ago, and now he would be tried by his successor. Farther up the hill, in a palace of the Lateran, Pope Stephen VI sat in contemplation. His vestments were folded neatly beside him, and the morning light struck the tapestry behind his chair, dulling its golden threads. A servant approached with mulled wine, but Stephen waved him away. He had not slept well, not from guilt, number that had long passed, but from the weight of presence, the sense that even death did not end authority or silence the arguments of the past. Formosus still loomed, his appointments, his ordinations, his voice. Though his body had collapsed into stillness, his legacy moved restlessly through the court. Stephen had made a decision. The bones would speak. He turned slowly to his scribe and nodded. "Begin the record," he said softly. "Let Rome remember." And so, the parchment was prepared. The court was summoned, and beneath the sagging rafters of the Lateran's tribunal hall, dust was swept from the floor. Torches would be lit, seats arranged, witnesses quietly selected. The body itself, exhumed, dressed in papal robes, would be seated upon the throne. A pope would try a pope, and Rome, old and unblinking, would once again watch as history unfurled. Not in war, but in whispers. The city remembers. Rome, in 897, was not yet the decaying ruin it would one day be painted. It still lived, if gently. Chickens scratched in small yards, and the towers of noble families cast long, crooked shadows at dusk. Laundry hung from beams, bells rang at uneven intervals, and within each cluster of houses there were voices, low, murmuring, curious. "Is it true?" one man asked at a bakery stall near the Ponte Milvio. "That he'll sit in trial robes? That they will ask him to answer?" The baker only shook his head. Flour clung to his elbows. "Rome has seen worse," said another, "and Rome forgets. Until it remembers." And indeed, it remembered. Not just the trial, not just Stephen or Formosus, but decades of papal chaos, of emperors from the north, of bishops exiled, recalled, condemned again, of synods and counter-synods, of Rome being not only holy, but terribly human. The old women remembered when Formosus came to Rome from Porto. He had been exiled once, accused once, reinstated once. He had fled from Pope John VIII, then returned. He had crowned emperors, and then regretted it. And finally, he had died. But death, in 897, was not the end. The whisper moved from bakery to stable, from kitchen to cloister, that Pope Stephen would bring Formosus's corpse to trial, that his crimes would be read aloud, that his fingers once anointed, would be stripped, that he would be judged not as a man, but as an idea. And Rome listened. Not all believed, not all cared. But the tale settled into the city like mist over the 7 hills. In the archives of Santa Maria in Trastevere, a young priest named Julian bent over his scrolls. He had not lived through the earlier papacies, but he had read of them. His candle trembled. On the margins of a parchment, he wrote one word in Latin: Synodus Horrenda, preparations for the trial. In the Lateran Basilica, now swept and draped in veils of dark cloth, the trial stage was being slowly prepared. Carpenters worked without speaking. A throne was placed at the center of the apse. Beside it, chairs for the cardinals, a witness bench, a raised pulpit. The stone floor was scrubbed clean, though no blood would be shed here. By candlelight, tailors mended the vestments that would be placed upon Formosus's body. White, gold, the robes of the papacy, mitre, gloves, pallium. And in the crypt, attendants moved with hushed breath. The tomb had been opened. The body, preserved poorly but still recognizable, lay on a bier. His face was sunken, fingers curled like pale twigs. But his jaw still held the memory of speech. He had once spoken with emperors. Now he would be spoken to. Monks wrapped the corpse in linen. They worked without comment, only offering soft psalms as they tied the knots. Then the preparations paused. A bell was rung. Rome would be summoned. On the morrow, the trial would begin. The morning of the synod. The day was quiet. Soft sun fell through the thin clouds, warming the rooftops only slightly. Pigeons gathered at the corners of towers, and children walked barefoot along the edges of fountains. The Lateran bell rang just once. It was not a call for worship. It was an invitation to witness. Inside the basilica, the air was thick with incense, not sweet, but heavy, bitter, the kind used at funerals. The clergy arrived slowly, wearing robes of modest weight. No one spoke loudly. Even Pope Stephen moved with unusual stillness. His eyes stayed on the throne beside his own. There, bound upright, dressed in papal regalia, sat the body of Formosus, its head tilted gently to one side. The skin of the hands was gray, but the gloves made them seem whole. Before the assembled court, the notary opened the scroll. Let the charges be read. And so they were, that Formosus had sought the bishopric of Rome while still Bishop of Porto, that he had broken the canons, that he had lied, that his elevation was invalid. The questions followed. Stephen rose. Why did you usurp the see of Peter? The corpse did not answer. Why did you violate your oath? No reply. Stephen turned to the assembled clergy. Behold, he said, the crimes of ambition, robed in holiness. He sat, and all of Rome held its breath. The verdict passed. The judgment did not fall like a hammer, but unfolded like old cloth being drawn slowly across a table. When the morning light faded into the quiet hush of mid-afternoon, the air within the Lateran was still damp with incense. Wax pooled on the flagstones. No one had moved much. The body of Formosus remained dressed, seated, propped as though waiting for a final blessing that would never come. The notary stepped forward once again. His voice was unhurried, barely a whisper in the wide vault of the basilica. The acts of Pope Formosus are hereby declared null, his ordination invalid, his papacy stripped of recognition. It was not a shout, not a decree, but a declaration delivered with the gravity of a man reading a line from a tomb. Stephen remained seated. His hands rested in his lap. He did not raise his voice. There was no triumph on his face. If anything, there was weariness, the weight of having spoken what others might not. Then came the sentence, not upon the soul, but the body. Formosis's robes were to be removed. His fingers, the ones used to bless and ordain, were to be cut. The vestments were peeled from the corpse in silence. The gloves were unwrapped. One by one, the fingers were broken from the hand, left to rest upon a cloth. Some say there was no sound. Others whispered that a bird called from the high arches above, echoing once and then vanishing. The wind stirred faintly outside. The sentence was finished, not in execution, but in ritual. Formosis's corpse was removed from the throne. The chair remained empty, and the congregation quietly filed out. Rome had seen the verdict, and now it would live with it. Whispers after judgment. The following days were slow. The markets reopened. Bakers lit their ovens before dawn. Cloaks were mended and shared. Pigeons returned to the fountains. Yet in every corner, under every breath, the story unfurled. At a wine shop near the Aurelian walls, a clerk from the Curia drank slowly, a wool scarf drawn around his throat. He said little, but his hands shook. They broke his fingers. He finally whispered to no one in particular. The fingers of a pope. An older man, a candlemaker, said only, "Not even the dead rest." In the cloisters, young monks copied gospels with careful hands, though their minds drifted to the rumors. Some had never seen Formosus in life, but now his image haunted them, not as a shepherd of Rome, but as a silent figure in a torn robe, seated like a warning. In the margins of one manuscript, a novice wrote, "Judicatus post mortem," a trial beyond the grave. And still others wondered, was it justice or vengeance? Did the dead speak through silence? The bones had been made to speak, but not all had accepted the words. The Tiber's toll. At the edge of the city, where the streets narrowed and the mud ran thicker, a few cartmen gathered at the banks of the Tiber. One, named Petronius, had seen the end of it. He said nothing as he lifted crates from his wagon, but his son, just 15, asked softly, "Is it true what they did?" Petronius nodded. "They took the body," he said. "They threw it in the river." The younger one stared at the slow-moving current. The Tiber had carried many things in its time: ashes, flowers, messages, secrets. But now it carried something else. The remains of a pontiff, dishonored and discarded. No one had sounded a bell. No procession had followed. The body, unwrapped and exposed, was slipped into the water beneath the cloaked dark of a quiet morning. The ripples were gentle, and soon, even they faded. Rome grows. Restless spring came slowly. The rains lessened. The vines in the countryside awakened. Swallows returned to the crevices between stones. But within the city, the air remained unsettled. There were murmurings among the nobles, whispers behind drawn curtains. The name of Formosus returned again, not in reverence, but in retribution. Some clergy began to speak more cautiously. Others, once loyal to Stephen, withdrew from his presence. And in hidden corners, old allies of Formosus gathered. They did not shout, they did not act, but they remembered. In the house of a Roman widow, a quiet meeting was held by candlelight. A young deacon, bold yet soft-spoken, said, "This cannot be the end." And it would not be. The Tiber had not swallowed all. Some say the body of Formosus was found by monks and reburied. Others claim it floated back on the tide like a message from beyond. Regardless, the tale would grow. The trial would echo, not just in Rome, but across the halls of Europe. Even popes would come to question it. And Stephen who had tried to put the past to rest by dragging it forward, would soon find himself on the other side of the same silence he had summoned. The fall of the judge. The weeks after the trial wore on slowly, and Rome, that quiet witness to centuries of empire, began to hum with unease. It did not come as a sudden uproar. Rome rarely did. Instead, it came in the form of glances exchanged between cardinals, pauses in sermons, small knots of citizens speaking at corners where basilicas cast shade over the cobblestones. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to conversation. And those conversations, soft and fragmented, began to take shape into something more. In the Lateran, Pope Stephen still moved with solemn dignity. His face had grown thinner, his steps slower. The great bronze doors of the palace seemed heavier each time they were closed. Even within the walls, loyalty had shifted. Some of his advisors had begun to excuse themselves more frequently. There were no confrontations, only absences. The tides of papal Rome moved with ritual and rumor. It was not long before Stephen felt it. One morning, near the feast of Saints Peter and Paul, soldiers entered the Lateran not with ceremony, but with quiet purpose. There was no clamor, no clash of arms, simply the low shuffle of boots on stone and the faint rustle of linen vestments as Stephen was taken to a monastery, they said, for reflection. Some said he wept. Others claimed he stared straight ahead. The truth, as always, was likely in the silence between these stories. A city turns without Stephen. The Lateran grew quiet. The halls still echoed, but the voice of authority had shifted. A new pope would come. His name was Romanus. Brief in reign, obscure in legacy, but his election marked something else. A desire to restore calm, to gently mend what had frayed. One of his first acts was to annul the acts of Stephen, to declare the trial of Formosus void, to recognize the papacy of the dead man. It did not undo what had been seen. The trial remained in memory, but the church sought to place a veil over it, to smooth the surface where the waters had been stirred. In small chapels across the city, Formosus's name was once more spoken in prayer. In Porto, where he had once served, the bells tolled for him again. Quietly, the recorders amended their scrolls. Formosus, once judged, was posthumously restored. Yet the trial had changed something. Rome had watched a corpse be made to speak, and the memory lingered, echoes through the ages. Years passed. Popes came and went. Some ruled briefly, others for decades. The Lateran remained. The Tiber continued its long course, unmoved by the politics that rose and fell along its banks. And yet, the trial was not forgotten. In monasteries across Europe, monks recorded the tale in scripts and marginalia. Chroniclers in Francia, in the Saxon lands, in Constantinople, puzzled over the story. A pope judging a pope, a corpse seated upon a throne. Some called it madness, others a symbol of divine justice. Still others avoided naming it altogether, but none could deny that it had happened. In later years, the phrase synodus horrenda entered the texts, the horrible synod, a name carved not in blood, but in parchment. Even centuries later it would be told again, around firelight, in study halls, in quiet disputes among theologians. And always, it began the same way. Did you hear about the pope who tried another pope? The tale outlived them all. Stillness again. And now we return to Rome. Not to the Lateran, nor to the tombs, but to the streets just after dusk, when the light softens and the bells toll in slow rhythm. A boy walks with his grandfather near the old steps of a church. The elder tells a story, The child listens, half in wonder, half in disbelief. A trial of a corpse? A pope condemning another after death? The old man only nods. Yes, he says. It was long ago. But it happened. The pigeons scatter as they approach a fountain. The water drips, unhurried. In the distance, the dome of St. Peter's catches the last light. The city has changed. Empires have fallen, crowns have shifted. But the story remains, not because of drama or scandal, but because of what it revealed, that even in death, power lingers. That memory cannot be buried. That silence speaks as surely as any word. And so ends the tale. A boring bedtime story, perhaps, of popes and judgment, of Rome and ritual, of bones dressed in silk, and the long, soft echo of a bell in the night.